I stared at the pale pink envelope in my hands, the familiar handwriting of my granddaughter Melissa swirling across the front. My heart warmed at the sight of it. After months of waiting, it had finally arrived, the invitation to her wedding. With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the sealed flap, pulling out the elegant cream-colored card adorned with silver embossing. Together with their families, Melissa Ann Wilson and Christopher James Bennett request the honor of your presence as they join in marriage. I smiled, running my fingers over the raised lettering. My Melissa was getting married. The little girl I had raised after my daughter Sarah's death when Melissa was only 8 years old. All those nights, I'd held her while she cried for her mother, all those school plays and graduations, all those quiet conversations about love and life. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. They had led to this moment. As I set the invitation on my kitchen table, a smaller note slipped out from behind it. I assumed it was details about the registry or accommodations, but as I read the handwritten message, my smile faded. Eleanor, please dress simple for the ceremony. You're not a main character. The words hit me like a physical blow. I read them. Again, certain I'd misunderstood, but there they were, clear as day. I sank into my chair, the joy I'd felt moments ago evaporating into a hollow ache in my chest. This couldn't be from Melissa. Not my Melissa who had lived with me for 10 years after Sarah died, who had called me every Sunday without fail since going to college, who had just last month sat at this very table laughing over tea and asking my advice about wedding flowers. The handwriting. I studied it more carefully now. Though the invitation envelope was addressed in Melissa's familiar script, this note was different, sharper, more angular. I recognized it immediately. Victoria, my son James's wife, and Melissa's stepmother. Victoria had come into our lives when Melissa was 16, just as she was beginning to heal from losing her mother. James had been instantly smitten, and within 6 months, they were married. I had tried, God knows I had tried, to welcome Victoria into our family. But from the beginning, there was a coldness in her eyes when she looked at me, a subtle undermining of my relationship with both James and Melissa. "You spoil her," she would say when I gave Melissa birthday presents. "She needs to learn independence, not cling to her grandmother." "James and I can handle the college visits," she had announced, excluding me from what would have been precious time with my granddaughter. Over the years, Victoria had methodically worked to position herself between me and the people I loved most. At first, it was small things. Family dinners suddenly rescheduled when I had already been invited, photos from trips where I hadn't been included, conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Then came the more blatant exclusions, holidays, where my invitations seemed to get lost, Melissa's achievements that I heard about secondhand. I placed the note down and walked to my living room, where photographs lined the shelves. There was Melissa at her high school graduation, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck as we both beamed at the camera. There was James as a young boy, fishing with his father at our lake house. And there, in the center, was my daughter Sarah, forever frozen at 32, her smile so much like Melissa's that it sometimes caught me off guard. Sarah would never see her daughter walk down the aisle. And now, it seemed, Victoria wanted to ensure I was as invisible as possible at the wedding. I sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years. The tears came unbidden, silent streaks down my face as I clutched a throw pillow to my chest. I had lost my husband 15 years ago, my daughter 12 years ago, and now it felt like I was losing my granddaughter too. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. I wiped my eyes quickly and answered. "Eleanor? It's Diane." My oldest friend's voice came through the line. "Diane, hello." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Did you get it? Melissa's invitation came to us yesterday, and I was hoping yours arrived too." "Yes, just now, actually." "Isn't it beautiful? Susan told me they're expecting over 200 guests." "Oh, and did Victoria contact you about the rehearsal dinner?" "She's handling all that, apparently." I hesitated. "No, she hasn't mentioned anything to me." "Well, I'm sure she will. There's so much to organize." Diane paused. "Eleanor, are you all right? You sound a bit off." I considered telling her about the note, about the years of Victoria's subtle campaign to edge me out of my own family. But what would be the point? To air family grievances to an outsider, no matter how dear a friend, felt like a betrayal. Fine, I said. Just a bit emotional about the wedding. My granddaughter, you know." "Of course," Diane said softly. "Sarah would be so proud of her." After we hung up, I returned to the kitchen and stared at the invitation and the cruel little note beside it. Seeing them together, the contrast was striking, one representing love and inclusion, the other a deliberate reminder of my supposed insignificance. I picked up the note again, anger now mixing with the hurt. Victoria had always been territorial, but this was different. This was malicious, and I was certain Melissa knew nothing about it. But what could I do? Confronting Victoria would only create tension before the wedding. Telling James would put him in an impossible position between his wife and his mother. And approaching Melissa directly with this might cast a shadow over what should be the happiest time of her life. My eyes fell on the invitation date. Just 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to decide how to handle this situation with the dignity Sarah would have expected from me. 6 weeks to ensure that Victoria's attempt to diminish me wouldn't succeed. I carefully placed the invitation on my refrigerator with a magnet, but I took the note and slowly tore it into tiny pieces, letting them fall into the trash. Victoria might think I wasn't a main character, but she had forgotten something crucial. In this family story, I had been there from the beginning, and I wasn't about to be written out now. As I stared at the invitation, an idea began to form in my mind. Victoria had chosen the battlefield, but she had no idea who she was fighting. I smiled and made sure the main character never showed up. The morning after receiving the invitation, I woke early and found myself pulling out the old photo albums from the hallway closet. I hadn't looked through them in years. It was too painful to see Sarah's face smiling back at me, frozen in time. But today, I needed to remember. I needed to ground myself in the truth of our family's history. I settled at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened the first album. There was James as a baby, cradled in my arms. My sweet boy, always so serious even as a child, his father's thoughtful eyes staring back at the camera. I turned the page to find Sarah at her 5th birthday party, face covered in chocolate cake, laughing. My beautiful daughter, gone too soon. Then came the photos after Sarah's death. Melissa, her small face solemn at the funeral, clutching my hand. Melissa's first day of 4th grade, her backpack almost as big as she was, her smile brave but her eyes still holding that shadow of grief. Melissa at her piano recital, looking back at me in the audience instead of her music, needing the reassurance that I was there. For 10 years, this house had been Melissa's home. James had been devastated by his sister's death, but ill-equipped to suddenly become a parent to his niece. "Mom," he had said, his voice breaking, "I don't know how to raise a little girl." And so Melissa had come to live with me, with James visiting on weekends. Those years were hard, but precious. I watched Melissa slowly heal, her laughter returning in small bursts until it once again filled the house. We developed our own rituals: Sunday pancakes, summer gardening, holiday cookie baking. She would curl up beside me on the couch during thunderstorms, just as her mother had done as a child. When she had nightmares about the car accident that took Sarah, I would hold her until she fell back asleep. I turned to the high school years. Melissa with her first boyfriend. Melissa in her debate team uniform. Melissa getting her driver's license, proudly holding the keys to my old Volvo that I'd given her. And then, in the later photos, Victoria began to appear. I remembered the day James introduced us. Victoria was undeniably beautiful, tall and elegant with perfectly highlighted hair and an immaculate manicure. She worked in marketing for a luxury hotel chain, and everything about her exuded polished sophistication. I had been genuinely happy for James. After years of focusing on his career as an architect, he deserved someone special. "She's lovely," I had told him privately after dinner. "She seems very accomplished." "She's amazing, Mom," he had replied, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I think she might be the one. The wedding had been a whirlwind affair. Just 6 months later, Victoria had an eye for detail and style, and the ceremony was featured in a regional wedding magazine. I remembered feeling slightly overwhelmed by the extravagance of it all, so different from the simple church wedding James had shared with his first wife, Karen, who had left him for another man when Melissa was just a toddler. After the honeymoon, things began to change. Victoria immediately took charge of redesigning James's life. His comfortable condo was sold in favor of a sleek downtown townhouse. His casual wardrobe was replaced with designer labels. His weekend visits with Melissa at my house became less frequent, with Victoria often arranging more enriching activities that conveniently excluded me. I flipped through more pages, finding photos from Melissa's high school graduation party. I had planned to host it at my house, as I'd done for all her milestone celebrations, but Victoria had intervened. "Eleanor, we have so much more space at our place," she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And James agrees it makes more sense. You understand, don't you? You can still help with the food if you'd like." I had swallowed my hurt and agreed, only to find myself relegated to the kitchen during most of the party, my role reduced to that of caterer rather than grandmother of the graduate. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. I checked the caller ID. Melissa. My heart leapt. "Grandma?" Her voice came through, warm and excited. "Did you get it? The invitation?" "I did, sweetheart. It's beautiful." I kept my voice light, determined not to let on about Victoria's note. "Can't believe it's really happening. 6 weeks? Did you see we're having it at Lakeside Gardens? Christopher's parents are helping with the cost. Isn't that amazing of them?" "It's wonderful. Lakeside Gardens is perfect." I paused. "How are you?" "Feeling about everything? Not too stressed, I hope." "Oh, the usual wedding chaos. Victoria's been a huge help, though. She knows everyone in the industry from her hotel work. She's practically planned the whole thing." "Of course she had." "That's great," I managed. "Victoria says it's better to have a professional handle it all." "Oh, hang on." There was muffled conversation on the other end, and then Melissa returned. "Sorry, Grandma, Victoria's calling me. She's with the florist. I should go." "Of course, dear. We'll talk soon." "Love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Melissa." The line went dead, and I sat there holding the phone, feeling a familiar emptiness settle in my chest. Victoria was always calling at just the right moment to cut our conversations short. Always helping in ways that gave her control. Always positioning herself as the indispensable expert. I closed the photo album and walked to the window, gazing out at my garden where Melissa and I had planted tulips and daffodils every fall. The flowers were blooming now, a riot of color, against the fresh green of spring. Melissa hadn't helped with the bulbs this past year. Victoria had scheduled a spa weekend for them both during our usual planting weekend. The more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. Victoria hadn't just written a cruel note on a wedding invitation. She had been systematically undermining my relationship with Melissa for years, inserting herself into every tradition, every milestone, every meaningful moment. I thought about calling James, but I already knew how that conversation would go. "Mom, you're overreacting. Victoria's just trying to help. You know how she is about getting things perfect." My son had long ago decided that keeping peace with his wife was easier than acknowledging her behavior. I returned to the kitchen and picked up the invitation again, running my fingers over the embossed details. 6 weeks until the wedding. 6 weeks to figure out how to navigate this situation without causing a scene, without putting Melissa in an uncomfortable position, without giving Victoria the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. But as I stood there, a newfound determination rose within me. I might not confront Victoria directly. That would only play into her hands. But I wouldn't passively accept this treatment either. There had to be a way to reclaim my place in Melissa's life, to ensure that Victoria's attempt to cast me as an insignificant extra in this family story would fail. I reached for my address book. It was time to make some calls, starting with people who knew the truth about my relationship with Melissa. People whose memories weren't colored by Victoria's revisionist history. People who could help me set the record straight, quietly, dignifiedly, but definitively. The first name I turned to was Robert Carter, Sarah's best friend and Melissa's godfather. He had remained close to our family over the years, though Victoria had managed to exclude him from recent gatherings as well. If anyone would understand what was happening and help me address it, it would be Robert. I dialed his number, a plan, already forming in my mind. Victoria thought she could write me out of this wedding, out of this family, but she had severely underestimated who she was dealing with. She did what? Robert's voice crackled through the phone, indignation clear, even through the poor connection. He was driving back from a business trip in Denver, and I could hear the highway noise in the background. Left a note telling me to dress simple because I'm not a main character, I repeated, the words still stinging even as I said them aloud. Eleanor, that's beyond tactless. It's cruel. And you're sure Melissa doesn't know about this? From our conversation, I'm certain she has no idea. Victoria is very careful to separate her actions from what Melissa sees. Robert sighed. This fits the pattern. Remember Sarah and David's anniversary party 2 years ago? Victoria told me the time had been changed to 2 hours later than the actual start. I walked in during dessert, looking like I couldn't be bothered to arrive on time. I hadn't known about that. She's been isolating more people than just me then. Several of us. Lisa Johnson mentioned she stopped getting invitations to family events after Victoria told Melissa that Lisa had been making uncomfortable comments about Christopher, which was completely fabricated. Lisa had been Sarah's college roommate and remained close to our family after her death. This was disturbing news indeed. Robert, what's her endgame? Why is Victoria so determined to push away people who care about Melissa? Control, he said without hesitation. Some people need to be the sole influence, the center of attention. Having you around, someone who shares such a deep bond with Melissa, someone who represents her mother's side of the family, that's threatening to Victoria. I walked to the window, watching a pair of cardinals in the bird bath. What do you suggest I do? Well, you could confront her directly. No, I cut in. That would only create tension before the wedding. Melissa doesn't need that. Then perhaps it's time to reconnect with the people Victoria has pushed away. Create your own support system, gather information. I'm not the only one who's noticed Victoria's behavior over the years. By the time we hung up, I had a list of names. Lisa Johnson, Pastor Mike from Sarah's church, my nephew Thomas and his wife Abigail, Sarah's cousin Jennifer, and several others who had been significant in Melissa's life, but had been gradually edged out by Victoria's machinations. Over. The next 3 days I made call after call. Each conversation revealed more of Victoria's systematic campaign to isolate Melissa from people who knew her history, who remembered Sarah, who had been part of our extended family circle. She told Melissa I declined the invitation to her college. Graduation party, Lisa told me, shock evident in her voice. I never received one. I sent Melissa a gift and a card, and when I never heard back, I assumed she was just busy with her new life. Pastor Mike had a similar story. Victoria informed me that Melissa had chosen a different spiritual path and wasn't comfortable with my presence at family gatherings anymore. It broke my heart. I'd baptized her, for heaven's sake, but I respected what I thought were her wishes. By Friday, I had a clearer picture of what had been happening, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Victoria hadn't just been undermining my relationship with Melissa. She had been systematically cutting off anyone who represented a connection to Sarah, to Melissa's childhood, to the years before Victoria entered the picture. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, surrounded by notes from my conversations, feeling both heartbroken and strangely empowered. The truth was coming to light. But what to do with it? The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Thomas standing there, a bottle of wine in hand. Aunt Eleanor, he said, pulling me into a hug. After our call yesterday, I realized we've gone far too long without a proper visit. Thomas was my brother Edward's son, only a few years older than Melissa. The two had been close as children, almost like siblings, but had drifted apart in recent years. Another casualty of Victoria's interference I now understood. I ushered him in, and we settled in the living room. He glanced at the scattered notes. On the coffee table. I see the Eleanor Harrington investigation is in full swing, he said with a small smile. Just trying to make sense of things, I admitted. It's been illuminating, but I'm still not sure what to do with all this information. Thomas leaned forward. Abigail and I were talking after your call. We think there's a way to address this, without creating wedding drama. I'm listening. The rehearsal dinner. It's traditionally hosted by the groom's family, but Victoria has taken over the planning, according to what Melissa told Abigail last month. Christopher's parents weren't pleased but didn't want to make a fuss. I nodded. This sounded exactly like Victoria's way of operating. What if, Thomas continued, you approached Christopher's parents and offered to co-host the rehearsal dinner with them? Frame it as a way to welcome Christopher into our side of the family, honor tradition, and take some of the burden off Victoria. Consider this. Victoria would be furious. Yes, but she'd have no legitimate reason to object without looking petty, and it would put you back in the picture in a significant way. Working directly with Christopher's family, bypassing Victoria's gatekeeping entirely. It was clever. Instead of confronting Victoria about her behavior, I would simply step into a traditional role that she couldn't easily object to without revealing her true motives. There's more, Thomas added. Abigail has been helping Melissa with some wedding details, and she mentioned that Melissa is stressed about not having special mementos from her mother included in the ceremony. Victoria apparently told her it would bring down the mood to focus on someone who isn't present. My blood boiled at this. Sarah was her mother. Exactly. Melissa is torn between wanting to honor her mother and not wanting to upset Victoria. So what do you suggest? Abigail mentioned to Melissa that you might have ideas for subtle ways to include Sarah's memory in the wedding. Melissa lit up at the idea, but said she was worried about approaching you because Victoria said you find wedding talk emotionally difficult, given your losses. Another lie. I'd never said any such thing to Victoria. Melissa's going to call you tomorrow to ask about it, Thomas concluded. Just be ready. After Thomas left, I sat alone in my living room, turning over this new information. Victoria had been using my perceived grief as yet another tool to separate me from Melissa. It was manipulative, calculating, and deeply hurtful. But now I had a way forward, not a confrontation, but a reclaiming of my rightful place in Melissa's life. I would co-host the rehearsal dinner with Christopher's parents. I would help Melissa incorporate subtle tributes to Sarah in the wedding. I would rebuild bridges with the people Victoria had pushed away. Most importantly, I would do it all with such grace and restraint that Victoria would have no ammunition to paint me as interfering or difficult. I went to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box on my dresser, pulling out the pearl necklace Sarah had worn at her own wedding. I had always planned to give it to Melissa for her something borrowed, but had been waiting for the right moment to offer it. Now I knew that moment was coming. Victoria thought she was writing this story, with me as an irrelevant side character. But she had forgotten whose family this was to begin with. She had forgotten that Melissa wasn't just her stepdaughter. She was Sarah's daughter, my granddaughter, the child I had raised through her darkest days. As I held the pearls, I felt a calm determination settle over me. Victoria wanted me to dress simple and stay in the background. Instead, I would step forward with quiet dignity and remind everyone, especially Melissa, of the bonds that truly mattered. The next morning, just as Thomas had predicted, Melissa called. Grandma, I was wondering, do you have time to meet for coffee tomorrow? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. About Mom. The coffee shop bustled with Saturday morning patrons when I arrived. Melissa was already seated at a corner table with 2 mugs. I ordered your usual, she said. Vanilla latte, extra shot. You remembered, I said, touched by the gesture. Of course. All those Saturday mornings after gardening club. She wrapped her hands around her mug. Grandma, I've been thinking about the wedding. I want Mom to be part of it somehow. Victoria thinks it might bring down the mood, but it doesn't feel right not to acknowledge her. I squeezed her hand. Your mother would be so proud to be part of your day, Melissa. And there are lovely ways to include her memory that won't dampen the celebration. Relief washed over her face. That's what I thought. Victoria made it seem like I was being morbid. I opened my purse and took out a small velvet box. Your mother wore these pearls at her wedding. I thought you might like them as your something borrowed. Melissa's eyes widened. Mom's pearls. I remember these from the photos. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I'd love to wear them. There's something else, I said, offering an envelope. Some photos I thought you might like to include in the ceremony program. She opened it, examining pictures of Sarah on her wedding day, holding baby Melissa, at Christmas the year before her accident. These are perfect, she whispered. Especially this one. She held up a photo of Sarah laughing. She looks so happy. That was at the lake house, the summer before. She was teaching you to swim. We spent an hour reminiscing about Sarah, planning ways to honor her memory. As Melissa prepared to leave, she mentioned, Victoria arranged a meeting with the wedding planner today. She's been amazing with the details. Sometimes I think she's more excited than I am. I chose my words carefully. It's wonderful that Victoria is involved, but remember, this is your wedding. The decisions should reflect what you and Christopher want. She nodded uncertainly. I know, it's just easier sometimes to go with Victoria's suggestions. Just make sure your voice is heard, I said gently. Monday morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia Bennett, Christopher's mother. Eleanor, I hope I'm not intruding. Over tea, Patricia came straight to the point. I'm concerned about the rehearsal dinner. Victoria has planned the entire event without consulting Richard or me. Traditionally, the groom's parents host. That does seem presumptuous. Richard and I were wondering if you might co-host with us. I couldn't believe my luck. I would be honored. We spent the next hour planning. The Bennetts had secured a reservation at the Riverside, a charming restaurant overlooking the water. Victoria had tried to change it to an upscale downtown venue, but they had stood firm. My next challenge was speaking with James. I called his office the next morning. Mom, is everything okay? He sounded concerned. Everything's fine. Could we meet for lunch this week? Just the two of us. The following day, I arrived at Olivia's on 5th early. James walked in at 12:30, looking every inch the successful architect. After ordering, he leaned forward. What's on your mind? I took a deep breath. James, I need to tell you something, and I'm asking you to hear me out before responding. He nodded warily. I received Melissa's wedding invitation with a note, not from Melissa, but from Victoria, telling me to dress simple because I'm not a main character. James's face fell. Mom, are you sure? I pulled out the note I'd taped back together and placed in a plastic sleeve. See for yourself. He stared at it, his expression shifting from disbelief to dismay. Victoria wrote this. Yes, I said simply. He ran a hand over his face. I don't know what to say. This is inexcusable. It's not an isolated incident, James. It's part of a pattern. I explained Victoria's systematic efforts to isolate Melissa from me and others who represented her connection to Sarah, the lies she'd told, her manipulation to minimize my role in Melissa's life. James listened in silence. When I finished, he looked burdened by what I'd shared. I had no idea, he said quietly. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to see it. I'm not telling you this to create conflict in your marriage. I'm telling you because Melissa deserves to have her wishes respected for her wedding day. What are you asking me to do? I'm not asking you to confront Victoria. That would only create tension. I'm asking you to help ensure that Melissa's voice is heard in the planning process. And the rehearsal dinner? Patricia called me yesterday about you co-hosting. Is that going to be a problem? He shook his head. No, it's appropriate. You raised Melissa. You should have a significant role. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. There's one more thing, I said. Melissa wants to include tributes to Sarah. Victoria has been discouraging her. James's jaw tightened. That's not Victoria's call. Sarah was Melissa's mother. Exactly. I'd appreciate your support if Victoria interferes. You have it, he said, firmly. Mom, I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I squeezed his hand. You're seeing it now. That's what matters. As we parted, James hugged me tightly. I love you. And I'm going to make sure this wedding reflects what Melissa wants, including having her grandmother play a prominent role. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straighter than when he'd arrived. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my son back. Now I had allies. Thomas and Abigail, the Bennetts, old friends like Robert and Lisa, and most importantly, James. Victoria had severely underestimated her opposition. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Venue confirmed for rehearsal dinner. Meeting with Chef Thursday. Join us? I smiled as I replied, absolutely, I'll be there. The rehearsal dinner planning with Patricia and Richard Bennett proved to be a joy. We chose a menu that included dishes from both families and arranged a seating plan that honored relationships rather than social standing. Through it all, I heard nothing directly from Victoria, though James told me she was fuming about being sidelined. Let her fume, he'd said during one of our now regular lunches. It's about time someone set boundaries. 3 days before the wedding, Melissa texted me. Victoria insists I can't wear mom's pearls, says they clash with the neckline. She chose for my dress, but it's my dress. I don't know what to do. I called her immediately. Melissa, what do you want? I want to wear mom's pearls. They're important to me. Then wear them. This is your wedding, not Victoria's. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. Victoria stood there, her expression glacial. Eleanor, she said, stepping inside uninvited. We need to talk. Would you like some tea? No, she snapped. I want to know why you're interfering with my planning for Melissa's wedding. I kept my voice calm. I'm not interfering. I'm supporting Melissa's wishes. Melissa's wishes. By encouraging her to wear those outdated pearls, by co-hosting the rehearsal dinner after I already made arrangements, by filling her head with all this morbid talk about Sarah. Sarah was Melissa's mother. Including her memory isn't morbid. It's meaningful. As for the pearls and the rehearsal dinner, those were Melissa's and the Bennett's decisions. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I know what you're doing. You've never accepted me as part of this family. You've always tried to keep Melissa tied to her past. That's not true. I welcomed you from the beginning. It was you who began pushing me away. You who tried to diminish my relationship with my granddaughter. Ridiculous, she scoffed. Is it? What about the note you included with Melissa's invitation? Dress simple. You're not a main character. Her face paled. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. James has seen it. He recognized your handwriting. Victoria's composure cracked. James doesn't understand. You've always had this hold over Melissa. She talks about you constantly, compares me to you. Do you know what that's like? To compete with Saint Eleanor, the perfect grandmother who raised her? Her raw emotion caught me off guard. Victoria wasn't just being malicious. She was deeply insecure. This isn't a competition, I said quietly. Melissa has room in her heart for both of us. I never tried to replace Sarah, and you don't need to erase me to be important to Melissa. That's easy for you to say. You share bloodlines and history. What do I have? 12 years of being second best in my own home. Victoria, I'm sorry you've felt that way. But pushing people away, trying to control everything, that's only making Melissa feel torn. She turned away. It's too late anyway. The wedding is happening in 3 days, and everything is arranged according to my plan. Is it? Because Melissa is wearing Sarah's pearls. She's including photos in the program. She's asked me to help her get ready on the wedding day. Victoria whirled around. She what? Before she could respond, the front door opened. James stepped in, surprised to see his wife. Victoria? What are you doing here? Your mother and I were just having a chat. About boundaries, Victoria said icily. Mom, everything okay? We're fine, I assured him. Victoria and I have just been clearing the air. Victoria laughed harshly. Your mother has been undermining me, and apparently you've been helping her. James's expression hardened. No one's undermining anyone. We're trying to make Melissa's wedding reflect what she and Christopher want. What she wants is what I've planned. I've spent months on this wedding. And it's going to be lovely, James said, gentler now. But some things are important to Melissa that weren't part of your vision, like honoring her mother, like having her grandmother play a significant role. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. So I'm the villain. Perfect. As always. No one's calling. You a villain? I said. We're just asking you to consider Melissa's wishes. She grabbed her purse. I need to go. Apparently, I have a wedding to salvage. After she stormed out, James sighed. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen this coming. It's not your fault. Victoria feels threatened by my relationship with Melissa. That doesn't excuse her behavior. He checked his watch. I should go after her. Good idea. And James? Be gentle with her. Underneath that anger, she's hurting. The next day was the rehearsal dinner. The Riverside restaurant looked magical as I arrived, tables arranged with tasteful flowers and candles. Patricia greeted me with a warm hug. When Victoria entered with James, our gazes met. I thought she might cause a scene, but she gave me a curt nod and moved on. Then Melissa arrived, radiant on Christopher's arm. She looked around, taking in the intimate setting and personal touches. Her face lit up with a genuine smile. She came to me first, hugging me tightly. Grandma, it's wonderful. Thank you for doing this. Over her shoulder, I caught Victoria watching us, her expression a complex mix of emotions. For the first time, I felt something close to pity for her. She had tried so hard to be the only maternal figure in Melissa's life, not realizing that love doesn't work that way. Melissa greeted Victoria next, offering her a hug as well. That was my granddaughter, big-hearted enough to love us both, even when we made it difficult. As everyone took their seats, I noticed that Melissa had placed me at the family table, directly across from her. Victoria was seated there too, but no longer was I relegated to the periphery. I had reclaimed my rightful place in this family's celebration. The evening flowed beautifully. Toasts were made, stories shared, laughter filled the room. Even Victoria seemed to relax somewhat as the night progressed. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, glass in hand. To Melissa and Christopher, I began, may your marriage be blessed, with the same love that has carried our family through joy and sorrow alike. As I sat down to warm applause, I caught Victoria's eye again. Something had shifted in her gaze. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Tomorrow was the wedding day. Victoria might have written that note telling me I wasn't a main character, but she had failed to diminish my role. In fact, her attempt to push me aside had only strengthened my bonds with my family. I smiled as Christopher's father raised his glass for another toast. Victoria had severely underestimated who she was dealing with. I wasn't just any grandmother. I was Eleanor Harrington, and I knew how to fight for my family with both grace and determination. The morning of the wedding dawned with clear skies and gentle sunshine. A perfect May day. I arrived at the Lakeside Gardens bridal suite at 9 o'clock, as Melissa had requested. The room was a flurry of activity with bridesmaids, hairstylists, and makeup artists buzzing around. Melissa sat at the dressing table in a silk robe, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandma, you're here!" She rushed over to embrace me. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, sweetheart." I surveyed the room. No sign of Victoria yet, though her influence was evident in the meticulously organized setup. Melissa's best friend, Emma, approached, champagne flute in hand. "Mrs. Harrington, so glad you're here. Melissa's been asking for you." She lowered her voice. "Victoria called. She's running late. Some issue with the florist." Melissa overheard. "She's been on the phone all morning, trying to fix the centerpieces. Something about the wrong shade of pink." She rolled her eyes affectionately, as if anyone will notice. I smiled, setting my bag down. "Well, shall we get you ready for your big day?" For the next hour, I helped Melissa prepare, pinning her hair, the way Sarah had worn hers, applying the finishing touches to her makeup. We laughed and reminisced, the way we always had. It felt like old times, before Victoria, before everything became complicated. When the time came to put on her dress, I stood back, letting her bridesmaids help with the intricate fastening. The gown was stunning. A classic A-line with delicate lace overlay, the neckline perfect for Sarah's pearls. "Grandma, could you?" Melissa asked, holding out the pearl necklace. As I fastened the clasp around her neck, our eyes met in the mirror. No words were needed. We both felt Sarah's presence in that moment. The door opened, and Victoria swept in, looking elegant if slightly harried. The florist finally fixed the... She stopped short when she saw Melissa. "Oh." Melissa turned, the pearls gleaming at her throat. "What do you think?" Victoria hesitated, her gaze moving from the pearls to Melissa's radiant face. Something in her expression softened. "You look beautiful. Absolutely beautiful." "Thank you for everything, Victoria," Melissa said sincerely. "The venue, the flowers, all of it is exactly what I wanted." Victoria nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. Then she noticed me. "Eleanor, good morning." "Good morning, Victoria," I replied evenly. "You've done a wonderful job with the arrangements." A flicker of surprise crossed her face at the compliment. "Thank you. It's come together nicely." The photographer arrived, calling for pre-ceremony photos. Victoria immediately took charge, directing people into position. Melissa in the center, bridesmaids on either side. "Eleanor," she paused, then added, "Eleanor, you should be next to Melissa." I took my place beside my granddaughter, touched by this small concession from Victoria. Perhaps yesterday's confrontation had made some impact after all. The ceremony was scheduled for 11. At 10:30, James arrived to escort his niece down the aisle. He kissed my cheek, then Victoria's, before turning to Melissa with tears in his eyes. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. Victoria quietly stepped back, allowing James this moment with Melissa and me. She busied herself adjusting Melissa's veil, her actions more subdued than her usual controlling manner. A coordinator appeared at the door. "5 minutes, everyone." The bridesmaids filed out, followed by Victoria, leaving just James, Melissa, and me. "I have something for you," I said, reaching into my purse. "Your mother wore this on her wedding day, too." I handed her a delicate lace handkerchief embroidered with tiny blue flowers. Melissa's eyes welled up. "Something blue?" Sarah carried it. "My mother carried it. Now it's your turn." James cleared his throat, emotion evident in his voice. "Mom, I need to tell you something. After you left last night, Victoria and I had a long talk. She admitted she's been wrong about a lot of things. She's not good at showing it, but she's trying." "That's all anyone can ask," I said. The coordinator reappeared. "It's time." James offered an arm to each of us. The two most important women in Melissa's life should both walk her down the aisle. I looked at him in surprise. "Both of us? What about Victoria?" "It was Victoria's idea," he said quietly. We made our way to the garden where the ceremony would take place. Victoria stood waiting near the entrance, her expression unreadable. "Victoria?" Melissa called. "Will you join us?" Victoria stared, clearly not expecting this. "But your father said..." I want both my mothers to walk with me, Melissa said firmly. My stepmother and my grandmother. Victoria's careful composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. She looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I nodded, extending my hand. Sarah would want both of us with Melissa today. After a moment's hesitation, Victoria took my hand. Together with James, the four of us began the procession down the aisle. As we approached the altar where Christopher waited, his face alight with love, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was how it should be. Not a competition between maternal figures, but a unity of family supporting Melissa on her journey. At the front, James kissed Melissa's cheek. Who gives this woman to be married? The minister asked. Her family does, James replied, his voice strong and clear. Victoria and I each hugged Melissa before taking our seats in the front row. Side by side, neither of us relegated to the background. The ceremony was everything a wedding should be. Heartfelt vows, tender moments, joyful celebration. When the minister introduced the memorial section that Melissa had insisted on, speaking beautifully of Sarah's presence in spirit, I saw Victoria reach for a tissue, then hesitate. I offered her mine, and she accepted with a small nod of thanks. The reception afterward, I found myself seated at the head table, not tucked away in a corner as Victoria had initially planned. Victoria sat across from me, still somewhat reserved but no longer openly hostile. During the father-daughter dance, James surprised everyone by inviting both Victoria and me to join them halfway through. As we stood together on the dance floor, the four of us linked in a circle around Melissa. I caught Victoria's eye. Looks like we're both main characters after all, I said quietly. A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. It appears so. Later, as Melissa and Christopher prepared to leave for their honeymoon, she hugged me tightly. Thank you, Grandma, for everything. I love you, sweetheart. Always have, always will. She moved to hug Victoria next, whispering something that made Victoria's eyes fill with tears again. As guests drifted away and the evening wound down, Victoria approached me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She offered one to me. To Sarah, she said, surprising me. Melissa's mother. I raised my glass. To Sarah, and to Melissa's bright future. We sipped in silence, a fragile truce forming between us. Victoria had finally realized what I had known all along. There was room in Melissa's heart for both of us. I smiled as I watched Melissa and Christopher drive away, rice and rose petals showering their car. Victoria's note had told me I wasn't a main character, but she had been wrong. In the story of this family, we were all main characters, each with our own important role to play. And as for making sure the main character never showed up, well, perhaps I had succeeded after all. The controlling, insecure Victoria, who had tried to write me out of the wedding, had indeed failed to make an appearance. In her place stood a woman beginning to understand that family isn't about exclusion, but about growing the circle wider. It wasn't perfect. Victoria and I would never be best friends. But we had found a way forward, for Melissa's sake, and perhaps in time, for our own.